Alright, I am back with another video, and today we are doing a bit of a bonus video. Obviously I'm not able to live stream this weekend, but I have a little bit of time where I can get this extra video out, and then something kind of popped up today that made me think, hey, I should do this. So Onyx, over on the Discord, if you want to join the Discord, there's a link in the description, basically pondered a question. How many different elements can we get on a single weapon, or at least a single attack? And that got me thinking. Now, Boss and Dex, also members of the Discord, starting deliberating back and forth with this amongst themselves about how to make this work, and they came up with a build that actually gets every single type of damage, so all the elements plus bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage all on a single build, which used different weapons, and they used different classes and such like that. I decided, okay, I'm not going to go for like all the different physical damage types, but I am going to try and get every single element on a single attack. So that is fire, ice, cold, thunder, poison, acid, necrotic, and psychic. Oh, and force. We also do get force in there. I believe that's all of them off the top of my head, but I know for a fact that when I made this build, I got all of them. So we're not going to be going into an in-depth kind of build thing here, as this is kind of similar to my original Minthara origin build, as this is a Minthara build. You don't need to use Minthara for this, but you might just have to drop, like, maybe Force to get Fire a different way and such like that. But this, if you wanted to kind of do this absolutely over-the-top, completely unnecessary combo, which does do a lot of damage, and the combat log looks absolutely amazing, then stick around, because this is really fun, and I actually really enjoyed kind of coming up with this. And again, thank you to Onyx, Dex, and Boss. I definitely would have missed some stuff if they hadn't brought stuff up in the Discord when they kind of were discussing this build. So, let's get into it. We are a level 5 Paladin, level 3 Thief Rogue. This is the same as my original Minthara origin build, except we have the addition of 4 levels of Sorcerer, primarily just for spell slots. We don't actually really need to cast spells with this build, we mainly want to be using the spell slots that we get for smites. And taking those 4 levels of Sorcerer out instead of the extra 4 levels of Rogue like I did in my original build, we're basically trading out sneak attack damage for spell slots, but because we're getting so many different damage types on this build, that extra damage is made up for pretty well. Now, obviously, as far as actually being a build that does, you know, as much damage as you can, this technically isn't optimal, because every enemy has different resistances and all of this sort of thing. If you've ever played the Souls games and you've used a weapon that uses split damage, it's kind of the same thing. Yes, you're technically doing more damage on paper, but because enemies have certain resistances, you're not always going to be dealing all of that damage to its maximum effect. For example, the Steel Watchers, which I test on usually, are actually resistant to psychic damage, so that won't be coming up in an encounter with the Steel Watcher. But the usual Flaming Fist guards do take all of the damage, so we will be able to test using them. And I'll actually be doing a live battle test this time. I did a quick test to make sure all the damage actually works, and it does, but I'll be going over how to actually set up the combo to get all the damage in combat as you would. So, let's get into how this build works. Now, I'm not, for the sake of time and just not to make this video too long, I'm not going to be going over every single piece of equipment that I would pick up throughout a playthrough like I normally would. This is kind of like an endgame combo build, but in the description I will have options down there for you. However, let's actually get into the equipment. So, the main thing that's going to piece all of this together is Fala Alove. And in terms of making this a Minthara build, I would say this is another kind of what-if scenario build. I would say this is a post-BG3 Minthara, who kind of, now that the Absolute is gone, is trying to find purpose in her own life. Obviously, she's still an Oath for Vengeance Paladin, taking vengeance against those who had wronged her. If maybe some Absolute cultists survived and were fleeing to far corners of the planet, she would be chasing them down. And as such, I feel like she would kind of, I mean, this is a drow weapon, I feel like she would pick this up. And I feel like, again, the main thing that would kind of be, you know, gripping her with the whole kind of absolutist thing is the fact that her soul is literally branded with the Absolute's mark. But I think she would turn that into her own strength, finding ways to augment that power, because soul branding adds extra fire damage and movement speed. But what if she found a way to incorporate even more elemental force from that brand. So basically, just over time, as she hunted down like members of the Absolute, she would just slowly grow in power to become this chaotic elemental Nova, which is what this build is called. Anyways, tangent over. That's the lore side of things, but this is less lore focused and more let's see pretty numbers and colors. Let's go. Fowler Reluve. The main thing we're going to be getting out of this is a finesse weapon. This means it's going to work with dexterity, meaning it's going to trigger sneak attacks, which is going to be important because we are going to need sneak attacks to get one of our elements. It's a +1 weapon, which kind of sucks, but by the very nature of this build, we are going to be using the Drakethroat Glaive, buffing this up to a +2 anyway, and we actually do have access to magic weapon with this build, and since we don't really have a primary concentration spell, it's totally viable to go with that to make this a +3 overall. But the most important thing here is Fowler Reluve Melody, specifically the Shriek variant, adding an extra 1d4 of thunder damage to our attacks. Technically, it's not actually a weapon buff, it's just the fact that when we hit enemies within an aura around us, they'll take the extra d4 of thunder damage, but hey, that's ticking thunder damage off the list. And with that, that is kind of our main weapon. As I said, we are going to buff this with the Drakethroat Glaive, which I will actually show off quickly, because the buff we want to use on the Drakethroat Glaive is actually very specific, because this whole build is very specific. So, tossing the Fowler Reluve on the ground, we can cast Draconic Elemental Weapon on it, and we specifically want the cold variant. This is the best way to get cold damage on our attacks. So, we're going to apply that here. Re-equip the Fowler Reluve here, and now it is a +2 weapon with an extra d4 of cold damage. So that's now 2 elements down, thunder and cold. Next up, from our headpiece, we have the Horns of the Berserker, which will deal an additional 2 necrotic damage as long as we don't have our full health. We also gain a +2 bonus to attack rolls against when attacking creatures that have already taken damage. So this basically means that now we have necrotic damage on all of our attacks. The only thing is if we don't deal any damage that turn, we are going to take 1d4 necrotic damage ourselves. But trust me, we'll always be dealing damage in some form. This is just how we're going to get necrotic damage. Technically, you could replace the Sorcerer levels here with Spore's Druid levels to get necrotic damage that way, the extra 1d6. And that's totally valid. You'd still be getting the spell slots, although the ability scores would be a bit meh, and we would get less utility spells overall. While I'm not trying to just go for the maximum amount of damage, I'm trying to get all elemental damage while still being a consistently strong build, and I feel like Sorcerer does do that a bit better for us. As far as what class of Sorcerer you choose, Storm is my personal pick, but it actually doesn't really matter. Storm would just give us the ability to, if we do end up casting a level 1 spell, we can fly around. So that's mainly that. I will get into the more class-related stuff later, but the equipment's more important first. So that's how we're getting necrotic damage. Again, there are some other ways you could do this, but this is how I want to do it. No specific cloak in mind, as none of them really affected this playstyle too much. So, Cloak of Protection, Cloak of Derivation, whatever you like. I did originally go with the Mantle of the Holy Warrior, because I thought Crusader's Mantle added radiant damage to our attacks as well as our allies. Unfortunately, it's just our allies, so we're not going to be getting radiant damage that way. As for our armor, there's no real armor that's going to give us another elemental damage type, at least in a way that I think would make sense for what this build is trying to accomplish, so I've gone with what I think is the best option to kind of counteract some debuffs that we're going to be getting, and that is the Armor of Persistence. This is going to make it so all incoming damage against us is reduced by 2, meaning that some effects like the Horns of the Berserker, and another one we'll get to in a minute, that would actually deal damage to ourselves, is now basically cut in half, which is great. We're also going to gain Resistance and Blade Ward, giving us an extra 1d4 to all saving throws, and resistance to bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage at all times. Obviously, Act 3 option, but you could grab the Adamantine Splint Armor in Act 1, which basically will do the same thing for us. We mainly want that damage reduction to help offset some penalties that we're going to be taking. Next up is the Stalker Gloves. We gain a +1 bonus to initiative, which is always nice, and now our sneak attack deals an additional 1d4 force damage. Since we're pretty much always going to be able to get off sneak attack with this build, that is consistent extra force damage, another element to add to the pile. And this is the Speedy Light feat. When the wearer dashes or takes a similar action during combat, they gain 3 lightning charges. Lightning charges add 1 lightning damage and a +1 to our attack rolls for each turn that we have it. And if we gain 5 charges, we could do a bigger attack where we deal an extra 1d8 of lightning damage. Because we're playing a Thief Rogue, we have 2 bonus actions, meaning that if we activate Soul Branding, giving us the additional 2d4 +1 fire damage, that's how we're getting fire damage by the way, and then Cunning Action Dash to get the lightning damage, we've now covered fire and lightning with our 2 bonus actions. So the rotation will be to kind of activate Soul Branding and Cunning Action Dash with our 2 bonus actions, and then go for a Divine Smite adding Radiant damage. So that's how we're getting Radiant damage. Are you keeping up? There's a lot of elements here. But so far we've covered Fire, Radiant, Cold, Lightning, Force, Necrotic. But there's a couple left. And Thunder, but there's a couple left to go. Next up, we have the Brood Mother's Revenge. Whenever the wearer is healed, their weapon becomes coated in magic and deals an additional 1d6 poison damage. So now, we're getting poison damage. And we have a couple of ways of healing. Namely, the Ring of Regeneration, giving us 1d4 hit points each turn, or we can use our Paladin features to heal ourselves as well as an action. And finally, for our equipment, we have the Caustic Band adding to acid damage, acid damage to our calculation. So, there's only one left now, that being Psychic, and we're going to be getting that from the Mind Flayer power, which is also cool that this is a Minthara build, Psionic Overload. I feel like the fact that Minthara was so deep in the Absolutist kind of thing, and the fact that her soul was literally branded and all this, like, the Absolute is now part of her being. So I think she would have retained at least some Psionic abilities, and Psionic Overload is perfect, even without the tadpole. So, this is going to add a 1d4 psychic damage to all of our attacks with the caveat that we take a d4 of psychic damage each turn. Of course, this is offset by the Armor of Persistence, meaning the maximum damage we can take each turn is 2, which is extremely manageable when we have a 1d4 of healing each turn. So, really, the negatives kind of from that become completely negligible. So, the way this build is going to kind of work in combat is you're going to want to set up your extra elements. Of course, we're basically going to have Cold and Acid and Force and Radiant all ready to go. And as I said, with your bonus actions, you're going to want to cycle in casting Soul Branding and Cunning Action Dash to get those buffs. I also recommend using Vow of Enmity from Vengeance Paladin. I think Vengeance Paladin makes the most sense for Minthara, as if you cast this on yourself, you can gain advantage on attack rolls against all enemies in a combat encounter as a bonus action once per short rest. So you're not going to be able to get all your elemental damage in a single attack right away, but basically after a couple of turns, you will. I think turn 2 is basically the earliest that everything could come online. And again, gaining advantage on all of our attack rolls is great if you wanted to run a Great Weapon Master with this build, which you absolutely can. I went for just maxing out Dexterity here, but if you wanted to maybe drop 2 points in Dex to add Great Weapon Master, since we have so many buffs to our attack rolls and advantage, you absolutely could, which would make this build even more powerful than it already is. As you can see, we're doing 11 to 23 damage at the moment, but you'll see when we start stacking the damage buffs how much that climbs. And again, you could get an additional plus 10 added onto that. So feel free to try that out. But of course, we're also going to need to set up Falor Shriek. And this is the one that's a little bit awkward, as it only lasts 5 turns. So this will probably be the last buff you want to activate when you kind of got all your other ones in order. So we want to get up Vow of Enmity. We want to get up Psionic Overload. We want to get up Soul Branding, and we want to get up our Lightning Charges. And since a lot of these do last for a while, it's just kind of Falor that could be a bit problematic, as everything else lasts 10 turns, but this only lasts 5. So you have to kind of make sure that Falor Melody is the last thing you activate. Also, there are a few other buffs that we can pick up for this build, such as Inquisitor's Might, that will give us Radiant damage, but I don't think that's really worth it. Our Channel Life Charge should absolutely be spent on Vow of Enmity. You can also gain Fire damage instead of Radiant damage on your Smites if you want, as well as Thunder or Wrathfall to get Psychic, which I think felt pretty, in line with this build, but we could also use Divine Favor to get that as well, as long as we want to spend our concentration on it. As a Sorcerer as well, we're going to get all of these different Elemental Cantrips and Chromatic Orbs, so we have the ability to use the different elements at range. Hold Person gained from our Paladin spell list as well is going to be great, guaranteeing critical hits, meaning that we can go absolutely crazy if we want to spend our concentration on that. I've also equipped the Darkfire Shortbow here to give us resistance to fire and cold damage, which I feel like makes sense for this build, and a lot of our damage buffs will also apply to the bow as well, just not all of them, so technically we can do at least part of this at ranged. The main thing we get from this though is obviously haste once per long rest, meaning that we can, if we want to, we can kind of risk maybe losing concentration to get our setup done a bit sooner. That's kind of an option there, but it's not 100% necessary for the build. Like I say, you can pretty much get this all online on turn 2. And yeah, I don't think there's much else to talk about here. I think I covered all of the elements. Let me just make sure I've got my notes in front of me. Fire from Soul Branding, Cold from the Drakethroat Glaive, Lightning from Lightning Charges, Thunder from Falarillu's Shriek, Acid from the Caustic Band, Poison from Broodmother's Revenge, Radiant from Divine Smite, Necrotic from the Horns of the Berserker, Force from the Stalker Gloves, and Psychic from Psionic Overload. Yep, that's everything, so let's give it a go. Alright, here we are at the combat encounter location. As you can see, my combat encounter is coming down the road as we speak, so I'm going to buff up slightly ahead of time with Vow of Enmity. Wait a second, and now we are going to talk to the Steel Watcher. Quick attack. And we're in a battle. Now, obviously, I could have done more setup before the battle started, but I thought I would kind of show off like how you would have to set this up if you were under the turn restriction. So, we're going to kick things off by activating Psionic Overload, as it is one of our longer-lasting buffs here. And as well as we could also activate a Cunning Action Dash here to be able to start getting our lightning charges. I am going to disengage and move back on this turn just to kind of force the enemies to come towards me. I'm just kind of checking ahead of time to make sure there's no extra enemies here, so that I'm not just going to get absolutely obliterated before I have a chance to really set up. So we're going to do things like that. That's the great thing about rogue levels in this case, is we do have a lot of maneuverability. And your movement speed is bullshit, sir. But yeah. These other guys will be forced to kind of use ranged attacks on us, but I can throw up a shield here and not worry about it too much. Taking less damage, much less damage thanks to our physical resistances. The critical hit did 3. Like, his build can be pretty tanky, which is nice. And this person is forced to run to us. Perfect. Now we're back at the top of the initiative order, and as you can see, I just got coated in poison. Also, our attacks, since we're no longer at full health, are now going to deal that extra necrotic damage as well. So let's start getting the rest of our powers. Falarillu's Melody for the Shriek. And then we're also going to do another dash for extra lightning charges. And then, in addition to this, I'm going to add Divine Favor. If we fall prone, we'll lose concentration, but if it works, that would actually be kind of nice. Yeah, so unfortunately we lost Divine Favor there, but of course it's not actually a part of the main rotation of the build, so I'm not too worried. These people are going to come and try and kill me, which is always fun. They're actually dashing because they've run out of javelins to throw. And this person is going to cast Crusader's Mantle, giving the enemies a slight buff, but nothing too bad. Right, we get a little bit of healing off, and now it is time to begin. Lightning charges, here we go. Let's grab those. As well as Soul Branding. And now with everything we have, Sneak Attack and Divine Smite, adding that radiant damage, we should be able to do... Well, that wasn't meant to be a critical hit, but let's actually have a look at the damage we were able to do. This is where the attack started, using Divine Smite on Fist Discordia. 21 slashing damage, 7 cold damage, 6 poison damage, 2 acid damage, 14 fire damage, 2 necrotic damage, 1 lightning damage, 5 psychic damage, 37 radiant damage, 2 necrotic damage, 1 lightning damage, and 6 psychic damage. That is just from the main attack. Let's look at Falarillu's extra damage, because the Shriek damage actually carries damage riders, meaning some of our equipment is going to do additional damage from just the Shriek damage being added on. So 6 thunder damage from the Shriek, 2 necrotic damage as well as 1 lightning, 8 psychic, 7 thunder, 2 necrotic, 1 lightning, 8 and 7 psychic. Now, we would have gotten a sneak attack off there and added all of this again, including extra force damage, but the target died before sneak attack would have even have been a thing. So, we get to use it on this person. So, I'm going to actually use sneak attack on this person to kind of show what it would look like without the extra radiant damage. We don't need to hit a crit on this. And as you can see here, with the sneak attack melee, we got 23 slashing damage, 4 cold, 6 poison, 2 acid, 2 necrotic, 1 lightning, 4 psychic, 4 force, and 2 necrotic, with lightning, psychic, thunder, necrotic, lightning, and psychic there as well. If we had activated soul branding ahead of time, we would have had every single damage type on a single attack. So it is possible to do with this build. Don't you do it. Aha! Shield is a very, very useful spell. Don't even think about it. Wow, you guys are bad at your jobs. What? Right, since we don't actually... I'm just going to do a little tag. I'm going to quickly bop you for 1. Bop! Dealing a bunch of damage there. And now we're going to do our full combo again. But this time we're going to amp it up even further. Cunning Action Dash. Now we have 5 lightning charges, meaning we're going to get that extra 1d8. Soul Branding. So let's actually have a look. We have Advantage, Psychic, Thunder from Shriek, Lightning. We're also going to get Soul Branding Fire, as well as the Poison, Acid, Cold, all of that sort of thing. And hopefully, if the Sneak Attack goes off as well, we will be able to hit 4. So I'll hit with a lower level Radiant Damage attack and see if we get both this time. Holy crap baskets. Okay. So, yeah. Here we can see every damage type in a single attack. 10 slashing, 3 cold, 1 poison, 2 acid, 5 fire, 2 necrotic, 1 lightning, 3 psychic, 12 radiant, 2 necrotic, 1 lightning, 3 psychic, 4 thunder, 2 necrotic, 1 lightning, 1 psychic, 3 thunder, 2 necrotic, 1 lightning, 2 psychic. And then this is now the sneak attack. 4 slashing, 2 necrotic, 1 lightning, 4 psychic, 3 force, 2 necrotic, 1 lightning, 4 psychic, 3 thunder, 2 necrotic, 1 lightning, 1 psychic, 3 thunder, 2 necrotic, 1 lightning, 4 psychic. Yeah, that's every that's every damage type in the game. Every elemental damage type in the game in a single attack. The only damage types that are missing there are piercing and bludgeoning. Yeah, it's the fact that I actually had to use a lower level Divine Smite there, just to show that you can get the sneak attack off at the same time and get that force damage in there too, goes to show that this is kind of strong. Again, I don't like making these OP power building things, and I don't think this is one of those OP power building things, just because it requires so much setup. But yeah, this is crazy. So the only thing about attacking the Steel Watcher here, which I am about to do, is they are immune to Poison and Psychic, so the amount of damage we're going to be getting off here isn't actually as high as it could be. And they are resistant to a lot of damage as well, if I show this off here. Yeah, they're immune to Poison and Psychic and resistant to fire and our physical damage, but this will still do just a little bit. So, there you go. As you can see, we hit for slashing, poison, we hit for all of the damage types. We didn't actually get our sneak attack off then, because I think it happened on the reaction attack last turn. But we can go for it again. And that time we hit a crit, which just means... yeah, I mean, I don't want to keep reading off the damage. But you can see that, yes, we do get every single damage type on a single attack with this setup. You just kind of have to know how to play the kind of like buff rotation to make it work. But having those 2 bonus actions is always nice, and since we're always using Cunning Action Dash to get the lightning charges, we're going to have a ton of maneuverability in that regard. Wha-bam. And we could, let's just get a crit. Just to show, yeah, there you go. Another attack with every single damage type. And we did so much damage. Again, the poison was reduced to 0, the psychic was reduced to 0, but you can just see all of the damage we can do here. There's a little bit of 5 force from the extra sneak attack that came in, and the Falarello Shriek damage happening on the very, very end. Like, I know I don't usually do these like most OP broken power builds, but the novelty of getting every single element on a single attack is just too fun to ignore. I absolutely love that this is possible, and the fact that it actually works out to being a powerful build is great. Yes, it requires some finagling to make it work exactly, and there is a bit of minor optimization. Again, if you get the Awakened passive on Minthara, to make Psionic Overload a bonus action. That works. But of course, if you're going for Psionic powers with Minthara, you can get Culver Weak, which would add even more psychic damage and even kill enemies a little bit sooner, although that seems a little bit unnecessary at this point. But yeah, this was just kind of a fun little showcase. Again, thank you to the people in the Discord, Onyx, Boss, and Dex for helping me do this. And I hope you guys all enjoyed this. Again, apologies for no stream this weekend. If you didn't see the announcement over on the Discord or the YouTube channel, basically I'm a bit busy right now because of private reasons I'm not going to get into. Don't worry, everything's fine. I'm just a bit busy, but it was kind of a family emergency. So I'm going to leave this video here as I am actually running out of time now. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.